The vineyard was stunning, draped in early spring light with rows of blooming wisteria curling along the fences. It was the kind of place that made you feel underdressed even if you were in silk. I had chosen a navy wrap dress that morning, simple but elegant, something that wouldn't call attention but wouldn't whisper insignificance either. I wasn't sure why I even showed up. Maybe it was routine, maybe it was hope, or maybe it was because my sister Indira had texted, "It would mean a lot to Mom." But deep down, I knew the only reason I kept attending these family functions was because I hadn't yet admitted the truth to myself. I no longer had a place in this circle. The estate's reception patio was filled with polished people, wine glasses clinking, faux laughter echoing across manicured hedges. I caught sight of Eris, my sister's husband, holding court near the fire pit, surrounded by their business partners and a few local officials. Indira stood next to him, smiling the way she always did when cameras or connections were around. I stayed on the periphery, sipping white wine and watching their world spin without me. Until Eris's voice cut through the ambient chatter. "You know how it is with freeloaders," he said, laughing loudly enough for everyone around him to hear. "They always show up empty-handed, but expect a seat at the table." There was a pause, small but searing. A few chuckles followed, nervous, unsure. Eyes shifted, then darted away. No one looked at me, but they didn't need to. I felt it in my chest, a slow contraction like a string pulled tight. No one spoke my name, but everyone knew who that jab was meant for. I set my wine glass down, the stem trembling just enough for the waiter to notice. He gave me a kind look, sympathy disguised as professionalism. I nodded, mumbled something about needing air, and walked toward the vineyard path behind the estate. The gravel crunched beneath my heels, and I let the sharpness of each step ground me. I'd helped Eris secure the down payment for their first property deal 12 years ago, sold my stocks, rerouted my savings, because Indira said, "This is our shot." I kept track of the books for their startup when it was just the two of them and a borrowed conference room. When payroll got tight, I covered it from my freelance contracts. Never once asked for repayment. Never once thought I needed to. Apparently, I was wrong. The walk back to the house I shared with my mother, Leora, was quiet. The wind had picked up. Cherry blossoms were scattering like confetti along the sidewalk, sticking to the hem of my dress. I didn't brush them off. When I stepped into the kitchen, the silence wasn't warm. It was watchful. On the counter sat a large envelope with my name typed cleanly in the center. My hands hesitated, but I already knew. Inside, a letter drafted by Indira's attorney. I had 30 days to vacate the premises. No appeal, no reason given. Mom sat at the table, folding napkins for the next charity brunch. Her eyes stayed on the fabric. "You knew?" I asked. She pressed her fingers into the folds, made them sharper. "It's best not to make trouble, Astria. Things have been tense." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I'd learned long ago that silence hurt worse when it echoed through the mouths of people you loved. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, now half used as a storage room. Dust had settled on the bookshelf, the lamp still flickered on its lowest setting. I looked up at the framed photo above the dresser, me at 8, missing my front teeth, holding a trophy from the school spelling bee. The frame was tilted. I reached up and straightened it, then I took it down. I started packing, not just clothes, but notebooks, old receipts, a folder labeled company contributions that I once thought I'd never need. As I folded the last shirt into the suitcase, I whispered words I'd only recently started to believe. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your battle. The driveway lights flickered on as I shut the trunk. No one came out, no one stopped me. I drove through Asheville's winding streets without a destination, letting the silence fill the space where belonging used to live. At the first red light, I looked at myself in the mirror. My lipstick was smudged. I wiped it off. The envelope arrived a week after I left the house. No return address, just my name typed in a too bold font, like it had something to prove. Inside was the invitation to the annual charity gala for the family foundation, my family's foundation. Miss Astria Vale, it read, no +1. I stared at it for a full minute. They'd removed my last name from the list of board members years ago. Now even the envelope sounded like it was trying to uninvite me while pretending not to. Still, I decided to go. Not out of pride, just clarity. I needed to see how much of me they'd erased. The venue was a rented ballroom downtown, glass walls looking out over the city skyline. Chandeliers glittered like the people under them, polished, detached. I walked in wearing a simple black dress, matte lipstick, hair swept back, no designer tag, no flash, just armor. At the check-in table, the young woman glanced at the list. "Ah, table 14B, she said, gesturing toward the back. I passed rows of donors and names I remembered helping cultivate. The room buzzed with polite ambition, and there I was, tucked behind a support column near the restrooms. My name card rested slightly crooked on the white linen, like even the paper was unsure I belonged. I sipped water, smiled when someone caught my eye, nodded to a few servers who recognized me from events past. None stopped. None said hello. Eris stood center stage, navy suit tailored sharp enough to wound. Indira, in a scarlet dress that clung like reputation, leaned in as he took the mic. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate legacy. What it means to build, to uplift, to shape a future from the ground up." I felt nothing, not pride, not anger, just a kind of watching that comes when you know a lie's been told so often, even the liar forgets what it covered up. Eris thanked his team, he thanked the board, he thanked Indira. And when she stepped forward, all rehearsed grace and glassy-eyed sincerity, she spoke with that voice she uses when she wants to sound like a leader. "I want to especially thank my husband," she said, her hand grazing his sleeve, "who has carried this foundation from vision to reality." There it was, not even a breadcrumb left in my direction. I didn't expect a standing ovation, but a name? A mention of the woman who helped write the first bylaws, registered the foundation, filed the 501c3? Nothing. My gaze found Mom's face across the room. She looked away too quickly, not with shame, with habit. I sat through the next 20 minutes, listening to donors clap for ideas I once fought to implement, ideas now credited to people who hadn't been in the room when they were born. When the wine hit the table and laughter swelled, I stood up quietly and made my way out. At the coat check, the attendant smiled. "Leaving early?" I nodded. "Table 14B doesn't have dessert," I said, and she laughed politely, not catching the undertone. On the sidewalk, the air felt easier to breathe. Asheville's spring chill brushed against my arms. I thought of the first fundraiser I'd ever planned, back when I was 27 and naive enough to think fairness was automatic in families. I remembered stuffing envelopes by hand, chasing down matching grants, designing the original logo on borrowed software. Now, I wasn't even a whisper in their narrative. Sometimes being invited isn't inclusion, it's obligation dressed in cruelty. I walked 3 blocks to where my car was parked. The streetlights hummed. A couple passed by, mid-argument, their tension cutting through the quiet. I envied their honesty. At least someone was saying what they meant. Before unlocking the door, I looked back at the building. Behind those glass walls, my name didn't exist. I wasn't sure what I'd do yet, but I knew I wouldn't sit at their table again. I woke up 2 days after the gala in a place that didn't smell like home. Not that the rental apartment was unfamiliar, just void of everything that once defined me. The kettle whistled. I didn't rush to it. Some mornings, silence answers more than coffee. While hunting through a box I hadn't unpacked, labeled tax legal, I found a flash drive wedged beneath old statements and receipts. 2015, board launch materials, was scrawled across it in my handwriting. My thumb hovered over the USB port. I hesitated, then plugged it in. The screen lit up with a dated file system. 1 folder, 1 video. I clicked. There I was, 5 years younger, seated in a rented office space beside a dry erase board scribbled with ideas. I was laying out the mission statement for the foundation, detailing bylaws I had drafted. Indira sat across from me, nodding like she always did when she didn't have the answers, but wanted the credit. Eris leaned against the window, arms crossed, his silence misread then as respect. The playback ended with my voice saying, "We'll need transparency and structure if we want longevity." I closed the laptop slowly, my breath locked behind clenched teeth. Something about watching a younger version of yourself believe in people who'd later erase you? It turns your gut cold. I went online, pulled up the Foundation's official website. Under Founders Leadership, it listed Eris Kessler, Indira Corbin, and, glaring like a slap, Zinnia Fairmont, co-founder director of operations. Zinnia, the intern I once mentored through her first grant proposal. I let out a quiet laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was theatrical in its boldness. If you're going to lie, might as well do it in high resolution on a website footer. I stared at my reflection in the screen. They hadn't just rewritten the story, they'd republished it without a single footnote of who actually built the Foundation's walls. That afternoon, I stopped by Mom's to drop off groceries. Leora opened the door wearing a cardigan I had bought her 2 birthdays ago. She didn't mention it, of course. "Thought you might need apples and rice," I said, placing the bags on the counter. In the living room, my nephew watched cartoons. He looked up and said, "Mom says Aunt Indira built the whole company. She's like mom number 2 now." Leora paused mid-reach for a teacup. Her mouth twitched, then flattened. I didn't respond. Kids don't make these things up. I walked back to my car feeling smaller than usual. Not because of the child, but because I realized the story had changed even within the walls where I once slept, cooked, wept, planned. Back at my apartment, I pulled out old financial records, tax forms, archive PDFs I'd once assumed no one would challenge. My IN number, the one tied to the original nonprofit filing, had been on a line marked Primary Agent. In updated documents, that same field was either blank or stamped over with another name. Crossed out, as if my identity could be redacted with a keystroke. It wasn't oversight, it was a campaign of silence, of reshaping, of gaslighting in board minutes and polished email threads. By early evening, I sat by the window, watching couples walk dogs, students jog by with earbuds, the ordinary lull of a town where people carried fewer betrayals. I opened my contacts and tapped Valora's name. "If I asked you what I still legally own," I said when she answered, "could you tell me?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "I can tell you in 48 hours, but Astria, you may not like what I find." "I'm not calling to feel good," I said. "I'm calling to stop being invisible." We ended the call with no small talk. No one says good luck when you're preparing to burn bridges they tried to deny you built. I shut the window, drew the blinds, and lit the small desk lamp beside my files. One page at a time, I began reconstructing the story they buried. The more I looked, the more I realized they hadn't forgotten me. They'd erased me. Saturday mail arrived in a rubber-banded clump, left askew on the steps of my rental apartment. I wasn't expecting anything. The bills were all digital, and I hadn't exactly been in a social enough place for handwritten letters. Still, I flipped through the stack until one envelope forwarded from my mother's address caught my eye. Legal cream paper, no return label. Inside was a formal eviction notice, signed with the crisp, unmistakable penmanship of Indira's legal team. 30 days to vacate. No courtesy call, no conversation, no discussion, just orders in typeface. I stood there in the hallway, motionless. A neighbor's door clicked shut across from me, the smell of someone else's coffee filtering through the air. I read the line again. Effective immediately, per estate council. I should have been surprised, but that part of me had already atrophied. By late afternoon, I drove to the house, not to protest, not to grovel, just to see if my mother even knew. The front door was unlocked, as always. Inside, it smelled like lavender oil and obligation. My shoes made almost no sound against the hallway floor, but she heard me anyway. Leora was arranging tulips into a chipped porcelain vase, the same one from my grandmother's wedding. "I got the notice," I said, standing in the doorway. "From Indira's attorney." She didn't look up. "It's for the best. You need your own place." I moved closer. "Did you even know she sent it?" She hesitated, then turned to me. "Your sister's just doing what she thinks is best for the family. It's complicated, Astria. Let's not make things harder." My eyes flicked to the bookshelf, to the spot where my father's photo used to sit, a black and white from his college days, eyes like mine, jaw clenched in quiet strength. It was gone. In its place was a framed portrait of Indira and Eris on their wedding day, as if history had been revised right down to the furniture. I left without another word. That night, I had plans to attend a local networking mixer hosted by a former colleague from my paralegal days. I didn't feel like smiling, but I needed the distraction. Asheville's downtown buzzed with the usual spring weekend energy: craft beer, indie music, the scent of fried food wafting out of breweries. Inside the venue, the crowd hummed with safe chatter. I drifted toward the charcuterie table, wineglass in hand, when a familiar voice called out, "Is that Astria Vale?" I turned to see Rachel Monroe, sharp as ever, her hair grayer now but styled with intent. She hugged me briefly. "Been forever," she said. "You still doing nonprofit work?" I hesitated. "Not exactly." She tilted her head. "Well, whoever handled that rebrand at the foundation, top notch. That new logo's slick, strategic even. Clean lines, bold lettering, really impressive." My smile tightened before I could stop it. "I designed that," I said. "Sketched it on a napkin at a brunch meeting 5 years ago." She blinked. "Seriously? You're not listed anywhere on the site." That night, back in my apartment, I pulled up the foundation's new branding page. There it was, my design, the curves, the exact spacing. But beneath the image, logo redesign by Zinnia Fairmont, creative director. Zinnia, the same intern I had mentored, coached, edited for, defended when she missed a deadline because of a breakup. I laughed, quietly, bitterly. I went to my bookshelf and retrieved the sketch pad where I had first drawn it. Page 26, dated in pen. Foundation ID concept, AV. I scanned it, side by side with the foundation's digital version. Perfect match. It was never about the logo. It was about erasure. Strategic, deliberate, professional erasure. The kind that pretends you never existed rather than confronting the fact that you did. And that you mattered. I printed every screenshot, emailed them to myself. Dated every file, then I opened my notes app and typed a quote I'd once read in a law journal, a quote I never forgot. "Your silence will not protect you." Audre Lorde. By the time the clock neared midnight, I had organized the files into a folder. Restoration. I dialed Valora. She answered on the second ring, groggy. "I don't want to scream," I told her. "I want to strike. Clean. Legal." She was silent for a second, then replied, "We'll meet Monday morning." I didn't sleep much that night, but I wasn't restless. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, my mind wasn't spiraling. It was stacking, categorizing, preparing. If they wanted to erase me, they should have picked someone who didn't know how to keep receipts. The cafe was quiet that morning, too quiet for downtown Asheville, even on a Monday. Maybe it was the rain tapping the windows like a secondhand metronome. Or maybe it was the way Valora stared at me across the table, her hands folded neatly over a manila file that looked older than it should have. She didn't ease into it. "There was a wire transfer," she said, sliding a page forward. 2 years ago. 50,000. From your personal account." I didn't blink. Payroll was short that month. Indira called me, said the foundation was in crisis and the grant had been delayed. I wired the money the same day. Valora raised an eyebrow. "No agreement, no signed record. It's not logged as a loan or a donation. They didn't list it on their taxes at all, not in the books, not even a line note." "They buried it," I murmured. "Quietly," she agreed, "but not cleanly." I didn't need time to consider. "Then let's dig it up." Back at my apartment that afternoon, the rain turned steady, not dramatic, just persistent. I opened my laptop and stared at the desktop background, a photo of the Smoky Mountains, taken before everything tilted sideways. My eyes wandered to a yellow sticky note in the corner of the screen. "Don't forget who you were before they told you who to be." I hadn't. Not entirely. I opened the folder labeled Foundation Archives and clicked through the timelines. Photos, receipts, old proposals. I found the email thread confirming that payroll emergency. I found my bank receipt. I even found an auto reply from Indira saying, Thanks again. We'll make sure to sort it out later. Later never came. Just before dinner, a notification popped up on my phone, a new message in the family group chat. I tapped it without thinking. Indira. If she thinks she's getting a piece of this, she's delusional. Freeloader isn't a legal status. Silence followed. No correction. No one else even typed a reply. I read it twice, 3 times. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone. I just left the group, quietly, permanently. Later that night, I was drying dishes when my phone rang. It was Eris. I let it go to voicemail. His message started clipped and irritated, but softened midway through like he realized he was leaving a paper trail. Hey, Astria. We should probably talk. Let's not make this ugly, okay? No one wants bad press or legal drama. Let's be smart. I called him back 30 minutes later. My voice was steady, controlled. You already made it ugly, I said. I'm just cleaning up the mess. He tried to respond, but I hung up. That conversation didn't need more airtime. I turned back to my laptop, opened a new folder, Restoration Plan. Inside, I began drafting a document titled Chronology of Contribution, Astria Vale. Every date, every dollar, every ounce of unpaid labor. Labeled, filed. At the top, in bold, I typed one sentence. I was never a freeloader. I was the foundation. They wanted quiet. I would give them silence, the kind that storms before it strikes. I stopped by my favorite bookstore cafe on the way to the foundation's new branch launch. It was supposed to be a quick in and out, grab an Earl Grey, maybe a ginger cookie if they weren't out. But the moment I tapped my card, the reader blinked red. Sorry, the barista said with a polite wince. It didn't go through. That same pit formed in my stomach. I opened my bank app, ready to check the balance. That's when I saw the alert. Your co-signer access has been removed from the Fairchild Education Trust. I stared at it for a beat too long, as if reading it slower would make it less real. That account had been set up for my niece. I'd opened it with Indira when we thought she might pursue pre-med. I'd contributed regularly, made sure the tax documents were filed, managed the automatic deposits. And now? Just gone. My name stripped without a conversation, without a warning. It was the kind of removal that said, you were never meant to be part of this to begin with. I still took my tea, paid in cash, and drove to the community center where the foundation's latest outreach hub was being celebrated. The parking lot was already full. Lights were strung across the entrance, soft jazz echoing from portable speakers. It had the atmosphere of a well-funded apology no one ever made. A man in a black jacket stood at the entrance with a tablet. Name? Astria Vale. He squinted, then tapped. I'm not seeing you on the guest list. Are you sure you're here for the event? I took a breath, smiled tightly. I'm the original lease negotiator on this property. You're using my signature to keep the zoning compliant. He blinked, then waved me in with a forced, enjoy the evening. The inside was familiar in ways that unsettled me. The drapes were a color I'd once insisted worked best for receptions. The lighting design mirrored what I had drafted for the 2018 gala. Even the centerpiece arrangement, a blend of eucalyptus and white lilies, was identical to what I'd pitched during one of the last meetings I was allowed to attend. The mural by the far wall caught my attention. I walked toward it slowly, every footstep sinking a little heavier into the floor. I'd painted the original sketch of that design on my kitchen counter 6 years ago. A brass plaque read, Concept by Zinnia Fairmont, Creative Led. Zinnia, again. I stood quietly, watching people pose for pictures in front of my work, now misattributed like a family heirloom sold at auction without my name attached. Zinnia took the mic 15 minutes later. Let's give a warm welcome to Eris and Indira Kessler, whose vision makes nights like these possible. Applause thundered, flashbulbs popped, not one acknowledgement of anyone else, not the original board, not the architects, not the real contributors. As I moved through the room, a woman with a champagne flute tapped my shoulder. You look new. Are you one of the interns? I blinked. Something like that, she laughed. I excused myself to the restroom before the tension in my jaw made my words crack. Inside, I locked the stall and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My lipstick had smudged. I fixed it slowly, deliberately. They can't take what they didn't create, I said out loud, quiet but sharp. When I emerged, I didn't head back to the main room. I walked straight to the front desk, pulled an envelope from my bag, and handed it to the receptionist. Please make sure this gets to the board, I said. It's time they read something that wasn't ghostwritten. She gave a tight nod, slid the envelope beneath the counter. Inside was a letter from Valora. Its subject: pending legal review, ownership attribution inquiry. As I stepped outside, the night felt different. Not lighter, not warmer, but clearer. That mattered more. It was time for them to know I wasn't asking for space. I was reclaiming it. The morning sunlight in Valora's office felt too clean for what she handed me. It was in your mother's safety deposit box, she said, sliding a scanned document across the desk. Dated 3 years before his stroke. I read the familiar handwriting. My father's. Sturdy. Certain. To whom it may concern, it began. It is my wish that Astria Vale serve as the primary legacy voice and financial overseer of all family operations upon my passing. No ambiguity, no co-signers, no conditions. The original never surfaced during probate, Valora added. But I was granted access under a power of attorney clause your mother forgot she signed. I stared at the paper for a long time. Not because I doubted it, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. That afternoon, I made 3 photocopies. One for me, one for Valora's records, one for delivery. Then I drafted a legal brief, not from anger, but from order. Every fact filed, every date time-stamped. I didn't want revenge, I wanted clarity. Anger is not the plan, I murmured as I typed. Accuracy is. By evening, I changed into a navy blouse and black slacks. Clean lines. No drama. I didn't need to perform anything. I already lived it. The downtown art center buzzed with the kind of energy that came with soft wine and hard branding. The annual foundation gala had outgrown banquet halls, apparently. Now it needed ambient lighting and catered figs on slate tiles. As I stepped into the room, heads turned. Not toward me, toward the camera lights pointed at Zinnia, who stood at the press wall giving an interview. The vision has always been about expanding access, she said, her voice carrying. This space, this energy, it's what we dreamed of from the beginning. No one mentioned my name, not in the programs, not in the donor board by the entryway, not in the slideshow rotating above the bar. And yet, every element in that room carried my fingerprint. The signage style, mine. The original grant structure, my design. The quote etched into the welcome plaque? Legacy isn't inherited, it's authored. I wrote that 10 years ago, late one night, high on black coffee and belief. During the silent auction, I made my way to the back office. The board chair, Mrs. Harmon, looked up from her tablet as I entered. Ms. Vale, she said with a hint of unease. I handed her a sealed envelope. It contains a letter from my father. And the original founding documents, I said. You'll find my signature where it always belonged. She took the envelope but didn't speak. That was fine. I hadn't come for commentary. I was never just helping, I added before turning. I built this. The door clicked softly behind me. I made it 5 steps down the hallway before Indira appeared like a storm waiting for ignition. Why are you doing this? She snapped, blocking my path. Her face was tight, the kind that didn't bend until something inside snapped first. I looked at her, not with fury, but with finality. I stopped being your sister, I said, the day you stopped being my witness. For a second, she looked human again, just a woman whose kingdom was cracking beneath the weight of its borrowed marble. I left her standing there, no scream, no scene, just silence. Back in the lobby, the gala continued. The violinist played something expensive. Champagne flutes clinked, and somewhere behind those curated smiles, a foundation started to feel its first fault line. They erased my name from the stage, but I just rewrote the guest list, and they're not on it. The glass doors of the foundation's headquarters shut behind me with the hush of money, not the kind that screams wealth, just the kind that's used to never being questioned. Valora walked beside me, heels soft against the tile. She didn't speak, but the folder in her hand carried more weight than a gavel. Behind us was a third figure, neutral, professionally distant, the legal observer whose job was to verify that this meeting, finally, was handled by the book. For once, the boardroom was half-filled already. Indira sat upright, arms crossed so tightly her shoulders curled forward. Eris was beside her, tapping something on his phone with the kind of controlled annoyance only men like him confuse with composure. The new board chair, a woman named Eliza Harmon, stood as we approached. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Vale," she said. Not warm, but not dismissive either. Neutral ground. I'll take it. Valora opened the folder and began methodically. Financial contributions, transfers, deposits that spanned a decade. Color-coded, labeled, undeniable. I watched their faces as the numbers built momentum. "We're not alleging," Valora clarified. "We are asserting, with documentation, that Astria Vale was a foundational financial contributor to the organization, involved in the development, legal structuring, and strategic planning." I added, calm and dry, "And yet, my name exists nowhere in the public record, not even in footnotes." Indira scoffed under her breath. Eris shifted, jaw tight. "Creative theft," Valora continued, sliding over emails where I submitted designs and internal memos, "and reputational sabotage." She paused before the last file. "Along with public defamation, documented via group chat screenshots." I leaned forward. "They called me a freeloader and then cashed my checks." Silence. Seraphine, seated in the back, stood and rolled in a cart with a screen. She hooked up a flash drive and hit play. The video began. Footage from 2015. A rented office with bad lighting. Me at the whiteboard, outlining the original mission. Indira nodding quietly. Eris saying nothing, just standing in the back, arms crossed. I hadn't watched it since we filmed it. My voice was higher then, more optimistic. The kind of tone that believes you're building something sacred. The camera zoomed in on the whiteboard. Phase 1, accessible healthcare programming, I'd written. Phase 2, community ownership. I turned, smiled, added, "We'll need transparency if we want trust." No one in the room moved. Even Indira had stopped tapping her pen. Her lipstick had smudged slightly at the corner. I almost told her. Then I didn't. Eliza cleared her throat. "Your names," she said, gesturing toward Indira and Eris, "appear nowhere on these foundational files." That did it. Phones buzzed. Board members began exchanging glances. Donors started texting. I saw someone step out of the room. I imagined headlines already forming in inboxes. I slid the final envelope across the table. Valora tapped it once. "Cease and desist for continued use of Astria Vale's intellectual property and creative work." Eris stood. "You want to destroy your own family?" I met his eyes. "Family is what you build, not what you exploit." He laughed, dry, hollow. "So, you're just going to walk away from all of it?" "No," I said. "I'm taking back what was mine." Indira whispered something to him, low and sharp. He shrugged, already calculating the optics. That was always his specialty. Reputation, not reality. I stood. "Thank you for your time," I said to the board. "You'll hear from Valora." I left the room to the sound of murmurs and the buzzing of unanswered phones. Outside, the night air wrapped around me like armor. Reporters waited on the sidewalk, but for the first time, they looked at me, not past me. "Ms. Vale, can we get a comment?" I smiled, just enough. "Legacy belongs to the people who build it," I said, "not the ones who inherit the spotlight." I didn't burn the house down. I simply turned the lights on and watched the termites scatter. 2 days after the board meeting, I pulled into the old driveway like I used to, when I still believed there was something sacred about that house. The magnolia tree out front hadn't bloomed yet. I stared at it from the car, thinking how strange it was that even the flowers waited to see if the house was still safe before they dared to open. Inside, the air felt muted. Mom didn't meet me at the door, but I heard dishes being stacked in the kitchen. "I came to get the box from the attic," I said as I stepped in, voice loud enough to carry but not confrontational. She didn't answer. I made my way through the hallway and stopped in the living room, where something felt off before I could name it. Above the fireplace hung a new family collage. It looked like one of those digital canvas prints ordered from a mail-in service. Smiling faces, childhood snapshots, holiday portraits. I moved closer. There I was, or rather, there I had been. My photo from the Christmas we took in Asheville, the one where I held my niece in her elf pajamas, was gone. Cropped. In its place, a reworked version with Indira and her children centered, the frame rebalanced as if I never stood beside them. I didn't ask. Leora didn't explain. We passed each other in the hallway like shadows that forgot they once shared a shape. Back in the car, I turned the heat up but couldn't shake the cold. Valora's name lit up my screen a moment later. I answered, more out of habit than anticipation. "We found something," she said. "In your grandfather's land trust. It was supposed to be split 3 ways, but a third was designated to transfer to you on your 40th birthday. That had come and gone last year. Indira and Eris filed for full control of the deed," she continued. "They failed to disclose the clause. You have standing to dispute." I stared at the house through the windshield. The windows looked dimmer than they used to. "I want to proceed," I said, "but this isn't about the land." "I know," Valora replied, "but it helps to reclaim what they assumed was theirs." Later that day, I parked near the estate, what used to be my grandfather's land. There was a sign now, advertising future vineyard development by Eris's firm. I got out and walked to the fence. The apple trees were still there, bare branches clawing at the sky like they remembered better seasons. I closed my eyes and pictured my grandfather's hands, calloused and warm, lifting me onto his shoulders the day we planted the first tree. He had said, "One day, this land will be yours to care for." I whispered, "I'm sorry it took me this long." Back home, Valora prepared the claim. I reviewed every document, signed it with a note written in my own pen. This isn't revenge. This is reclamation. I spent the evening compiling a list of memories tied to that land. Not for the court. For me. The hayride we did one October. The time Indira twisted her ankle and I carried her all the way back. The way our grandfather always saved the last apple for me, even when I hadn't asked. It hurt more than I expected. But it didn't weaken me. The next morning, I got a call from a local realtor. "I thought you'd want to know," she said, cautious. The buyers pulled out of the vineyard deal, said something about public scrutiny, legal instability. I thanked her. Hung up. No call came from Indira, no message from Eris. But I didn't need an apology. I didn't need a name added back into some photo collage. Truth doesn't need volume, it just needs a place to land. They never needed to say sorry. I made peace without their permission. Midweek in Asheville meant traffic was light, the sky flat with early humidity, and the coffee shop by Valora's office humming with quiet regulars. I sat across from her in a booth near the back, watching her flip through the thick binder she'd assembled. No background music, no ambient hum, just pages turning, soft and final. 15 years, she murmured. Loan wires, direct transfers, non-compensated contracts. You didn't just fund the skeleton, you built the muscle. I knew I gave more than I should, I said. I just didn't realize how easy it would be for them to pretend I hadn't. Valora pulled a manila envelope from her leather briefcase and sealed the binder shut. This goes to their counsel today. Retroactive withdrawal notice, accompanied by a liability freeze on any claim connected to your original capital contributions. I took a sip of tea. And the headline? That's up to them. By afternoon, the damage had begun. I didn't need to refresh the page to know things were unraveling. Foundation payroll systems glitched. Auto withdrawals failed. Messages started stacking in inboxes. Donors couldn't process pledges. Then, the Instagram post, Zinnia, bless her digital heart, wrote, "I was told everything was in order. This isn't my fault." Poor thing. By the next day, 2 board members had resigned. Quietly, like slipping out of a room where someone else was taking the blame. That evening, Valora called again. "Certified mail came in from the county archive office," she said. "It's the original will." I paused, one hand on the window ledge. And it names you sole recipient of the estate parcel. No conditions, no mention of shared inheritance. And Indira's version? Filed 6 weeks after the funeral. Legally, it's under review for fraud. We don't need to pursue charges. The state might. I sat down slowly. Not because I was shocked, but because there's something exhausting about truth finally arriving after you've spent years standing at the door, knocking. I walked to my favorite coffee shop the next morning, window seat, same table. My phone buzzed as I stirred honey into my drink. It was Emily, an old friend from law school. She sent a link with no message. I tapped it. Legacy Crumbles, Foundation under legal review for misconduct and property fraud. My name wasn't in the headline, but it didn't need to be. I didn't smile, but I did breathe. Fully, for the first time in, maybe ever. Later that afternoon, another buzz. Voicemail from Eris. Look, let's fix this. Quietly. No need for escalations, lawsuits, family dragging each other through the mud. We can work something out. Be smart. I didn't listen to the rest. I forwarded it to Valora with a subject line. Unsolicited offer, no response needed. In the body, I typed one line. Let them feel what it's like when silence speaks louder than power. They buried my name. I let the weight of their greed dig the rest of the grave. The envelope came by courier this time, not through email, not hidden in some forwarded mail pile, but handed off by a man in a pressed jacket who didn't linger for a tip. He simply nodded, said, Miss Vale, and disappeared. Inside was one sheet of paper, formal confirmation that my name had been legally severed from all financial, structural, and property ties to the Kessler Foundation and related entities. It was done. The page didn't feel heavy, but it landed on my kitchen counter like a tombstone. I folded it neatly, placed it in a folder labeled Closure, and zipped it into a file drawer. I didn't pour a glass of wine. I didn't blast triumphant music. I just stood still for a long moment, not grieving, not celebrating, just emptying out. The next day, I drove back to the house one final time. I didn't call ahead. I didn't need to. The air smelled like rosemary and vinegar, same as it always had. I stepped onto the porch and saw it, sitting on the top step in a soaked cardboard box, the gift I had sent for my nephew's birthday. The paper was shredded, rain-stained, curling in on itself. On top was a sticky note, half peeled, the ink still legible. We asked you not to. No name, no signature, but the handwriting was Indira's. I picked it up, didn't even glance at what was inside. Walked 3 steps over to the garbage bin and dropped it in, not with force, just placed. Leora opened the door as I turned to leave. Her expression was unreadable. I'm just here for one last box, I said. From the attic. She stepped aside. 10 minutes later, I came down with a small storage tote, old photo albums, a few letters, and 3 books that still smelled faintly of my childhood room. We didn't speak. We didn't hug. I didn't expect her to stop me. Outside, I slid the tote into the trunk. Before I got in the car, I looked back. Just once. They could keep the furniture. The rooms, the holiday china, and the curated scrapbook pages, they could keep their version of history. I didn't take their money. I took my value back. Driving away, the roads felt different, wider, less like escape routes, and more like possibilities. I rolled down the window halfway. The air carried no memories, only breath. Later that week, I sat at my desk in the new apartment, a smaller space with creaky floors and imperfect corners. But it was mine, fully mine. I opened my laptop and pulled up LinkedIn, deleted old titles, added new ones. Under the About section, I wrote, former nonprofit strategist, current author, always building, even when no one gives you the blueprint. Then I opened a Word document and typed a new title at the top, Inherited Nothing. It wasn't just a book. It was the sentence that had followed me for years, silently, cruelly. Now, I owned it. That afternoon, I stood in line at the county clerk's office to reclaim my maiden name. The woman behind the counter looked up. New passport? License? She asked. All of it, I said. I'm starting clean. She smiled. A fresh page. No, I said gently. Just the right one. That night, I made tea, sat by the window, watched the city wind down. My phone buzzed. A message from Indira. Mom isn't well. You should come by. I stared at it for a full minute, typed out, I hope she finds peace, just like I did. Deleted it, turned the phone face down. Some endings don't need words. I didn't walk away with everything, just enough to never walk back. The room wasn't grand, just intimate. Brick walls, warm lighting, folding chairs filled with strangers who somehow already knew me. And maybe that was the strangest part. They'd read my story before I ever read it aloud. The launch of Inherited Nothing wasn't supposed to be a moment. It was meant to be a quiet nod to closure. But the crowd filling that indie bookstore's upper room told me something else. Some stories wait decades to be heard. The moderator from the local women's collective leaned in to ask the first question. You're the woman they tried to erase, she said, not unkindly. How does it feel to take up space like this now? I smiled, not wide, just steady. I still am, I replied. But now I write the captions. Laughter, applause. Cameras flashed, but none of it made me shrink. I sat tall in the chair, legs crossed neatly, voice clear. Halfway through the QA, I noticed someone rising slowly in the back. Older, careful, Leora. She didn't speak. Not during the session, not during the applause, but after, when the room was buzzing and books were being signed, she approached and stood in front of me with a small, weathered envelope. She didn't offer excuses, no speech, just this. I should have never let them silence you. Then she pressed the envelope into my hand and turned before I could reply. Inside was a photo I hadn't seen in years. Me at age 10, beaming in overalls, holding a first-place ribbon. Behind me stood my father, his hand on my shoulder. The back read, in her script, You were always the one who stayed steady. I didn't cry, but my hand didn't stop shaking for 5 minutes. A few weeks later, I found myself backstage at a women's financial summit. Someone had forwarded the book to a podcast producer, which turned into a feature, which turned into a keynote invite. I stepped out to that stage with no notes. They clapped as I walked out, but I didn't speak for applause. I was called a freeloader, I said, by people who lived on the things I gave. I was erased from photos I took, records I filed, plans I designed. I let the silence breathe before continuing. Women are taught to equate silence with strength, to call loyalty what's actually erasure. I used to believe that too. Pause. Not anymore. I scanned the crowd, faces of professionals, survivors, changemakers. You don't have to shout to be heard, I said. You just have to be undeniable. Another round of applause, this time quieter, fuller. Afterward, in the green room, someone brought champagne. Someone else brought tears. I brought nothing but breath. That was enough. One last text from Indira came days later. She didn't ask for a meeting, didn't acknowledge the book, just this. We should talk. I typed back. We've already said everything we needed to, just not in words. Then I deleted it. Let silence carry it for me. That night, I sat on my balcony under a pale Carolina moon, alone, whole, free. They called me a freeloader. And now they call me ma'am. That's enough. This story ends with my name, right where it belongs.